Greetings, it is I, David Stewart. Let's talk a little bit today about fantasy map making. If you've been following me on my social media accounts, specifically Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, you've probably seen a couple of samples that I've put out recently of some maps that I'm going to be using in my upcoming book. It's a fantasy novel called The Water of Awakening. If you are interested in it, you can find links to it down below for the pre-order page. It comes out on July 7th. The ebook pre-order will be 99 cents. I don't have the paperback pre-order set up yet. That'll probably happen about a week before release, so be patient if that's what you want, is that paper version. I am working hard to make sure that product happens, but you'll help me out a lot by pre-ordering it, and you'll also get a deal on it because the price will go up a little bit after release. And if you have one of those advanced copies, or if you buy it now, I always appreciate a review. It very much helps me out. So I showed a couple of maps, and they were specifically kind of in the Tolkien style. So if you haven't seen them, let's take a look at them. So here they are. It's actually the same map, but two different versions of the same map. The one on the left is a hand-drawn, drew it with this pen, hand-drawn map, attempting to emulate sort of the older plate pressing style, the lithographic style that you see in older fantasy novels, specifically those of J.R.R. Tolkien and like Michael Moorcock and a bunch of other fantasy authors as well, Ursula Le Guin. Over here on the right is it with all the text, and once the text is on it, people were immediately saying, "Oh, it looks like Tolkien," because there's a couple of Tolkien editions out there that use red text over the black background. I think the red text over the black background looks great. So I really wanted to use it for the color version of this map. The paperback will probably have a black and white version of the map that will still be quite functional. But for this one, I really like the red and the green and the black. I think it's simple and it works well. And again, the style I was going for was like a plate pressing, not so much like a fully gradiated, high-res picture of a map that you'd see in kind of a modern book. Like if you look at the map in, say, the Stormlight Archive books, it's very detailed, it's very shaded. That wasn't actually what I wanted. I wanted something simpler and more classic. So let me show you how I did both of these. First, the one on the left, I'll show you the drawing techniques I did to sort of create that map. Then the one on the right, I'll show you how I did the text. The text was done digitally in a program called Inkscape. Be sure to sign up to my mailing list. I'll have the mailing list down below. I'll provide access to all of these high-res files as well as the Inkscape file if you'd like to open up the Inkscape file and see exactly what I did on everything and maybe use it for you. So hopefully this is stuff that you can use for possibly your book if you're writing a book or you're writing a story, or if you're running like an RPG campaign, a tabletop RPG campaign, if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or GURPS or some similar game like that, Mifarog, then you can draw a map of your own using these techniques. And it's also just another way that you maybe want to express your creativity and imagination and imagining a new land. So let's take a look first at the one on the left, on your left, the actual just hand-drawn thing. I'm going to put up a little bit of a second camera here so you can see more or less what I've done here. This is actually a Xerox of my original. In case I wanted to draw on this, I don't want to draw on my original. I want to keep that one pretty pristine, but it's a good Xerox, so it looks pretty much like the original. A couple of things that I will note about what I did here before I show all the techniques for the mountains and the coasts and I guess the rivers and the hills. I'll show how I did each of these elements. I did this on computer paper. I didn't do this on like nice artist paper. I didn't do it on archival paper or anything like that. I did use a good pen. This is a Faber-Castell pen, XS. It's called the Pitt Artist Pen. Black 199 is the color, and it's really good. I like it, and that's what I did the entire thing with, just that one pen. I didn't use any extra pens, though you can use thicker and thinner pens if you want to, and you have access to those. So I did it on computer paper, and I actually have reasons for that other than I'm cheap and don't want to spring on good paper. I did it on this computer paper. It's not bad computer paper. First, because it's an extremely bright white. It's like as white will be. And a lot of artists' papers are sometimes just a little bit not pristine white. You can get them in pristine white, but I really wanted it to be pristine white, and I wanted it to have no texture. A lot of archival paper tends to have a little bit of a texture to it, like if you have some cotton in it to make sure that the paper doesn't just turn to pulp with age. Then you have a little bit of a texture. And both of those things, when you scan them into the computer, because I wanted to do the text digitally so it was really neat and very legible, When you scan it into the computer, that can make the image come out in a couple of different ways. And the main one is it can create not a true white background. And that's what I wanted. I wanted a really true white background when I scanned it in with color. And the reason I scanned it in with color is that it gets more of the gradiated shades versus if I did it at black and white, it ends up looking a little more jagged. So I wanted a really, really pristine white. I don't have to like really strip out the white background at all. I can take this file and put it straight into my paperback, and it's going to be printed and look just like that lithographic pressing style that we remember from the 60s and 70s and 80s, which is exactly what I wanted to do. That was aesthetically what I wanted to do. So I did use computer paper for that rather than a better quality paper. And also computer paper is really cheap. So I could do a bunch of these and not feel bad about wasting paper at all. And I also did it in this elongated version because I wanted it to take up just one page in a paperback rather than spreading across several pages. And also because when I want this to show up in the ebook, when you're looking at it on your device, I want it to be just visible in one frame without having to like shift or move it around, which happens with a lot of ebook conversions of fantasy books. So this was what I ended up coming up with. This is actually the third or fourth iteration, by the way. I did several different versions of this before I got to one that I liked. And you may have that too, but I find that the more I repeat something, the better and better I get at it. So I wasn't too upset about doing several different versions of this. This one finally came out right, and I was doing all the techniques correctly. Let me show you a couple of the techniques that I did. And actually, before I show you the techniques, let me talk quickly about layout, because you want to decide where things are going to be. What I did is I took a number 1 pencil on my paper, and I put down a couple of marks to show where I wanted certain geographical features to actually end up in the final product. So I put an X here for this bay area. This is going to be a city called Golis in the book. And I put a dot here. This will be a city called Fiskerhall. And then I put a dot here. This will be the city called Bergen. And that's where I knew I was going to draw these geographic features. So they were guide as I was drawing. I was going to get to here and draw the geographic feature and draw the geographic feature and do like that. I just put some very, very light lines where I wanted the mountains to be. I didn't draw mountains. I just put like a couple of dots, indicated where I want the mountains. A little dot where I wanted the lake, and there's also a city here called Solberg that I wanted to have. I wanted to put an X where I wanted another city and lake right here. I put one here for Thruttle, I put one here for Greenfell, put one here for Hostin, put one here for Skjolding, which is another city in here. So I put down where all the cities are going to be so I could draw the features around them. I roughly put where I wanted the mountains to be, where I wanted my Feylands to be, where I wanted my Fey Waste to be, where I wanted my other mountains to be. So I had all these little number 1 pencil dots here. And once I had all of those filled in, then I just started drawing by freehand to figure out where all they were. Let's start with the mountains. Let me show you how I drew the mountains. I actually started with the coastline, but let me show mountains to start. So mountains are actually really simple in this style. You can draw just basically like a little shark tooth like that. There we go. So you can draw a little shark tooth, and you can make it kind of jagged like that if you want. And then from there, I just shaded one half of the mountain like this, and then I put a little edge to the mountain on either side like that. Okay, and then when you put a couple of those together, it ends up looking pretty good. And I actually did a complete fill-in of these. I didn't leave any white space in there if I could. There's little white spaces here and there, but I tried to get them completely filled in. So after I did this, I drew a little outline, and I really just like filled in the spaces here with the pen to get that. So that's how I got these mountain looks to look like this. And you can do them a whole bunch of different ways if you want to get sort of these different effects of mountains. And as you add them up, you get this total effect like this. I just lifted this technique right from Tolkien. I just stole it from him. He shades everything on the left-hand side as if the sun's rising in the east. I shaded everything on the right-hand side as if the sun's setting in the west. It just felt better with my hand to do because I'm right-handed. So Tolkien might have been left-handed. I actually don't know. I don't know if he was or not. Anyway, let's talk about the coastal lines. You have 3 little lines to indicate that you have water. And when you put text here, then it's clear to the viewer that this is a big body of water. And then for the lakes, I did the same thing. I filled it in. So in this way, you get sort of a filled in effect without having to like try to color it in some way. So there's still only going to be like it's either black or white when we're doing this. That's the goal. So let me show you how I did that. Actually, before I do that, I realized these might be small. So let me do like a big version of these mountains for you guys to see if you want. Okay. So let's supersize it with a big old Sharpie here. So if you want a nice big version of the mountain, you can just draw a big mountain like this, however you want to do it. We can kind of flare out the bottom edges like this, and then you're just literally going to shade in about that much of the mountain. Okay, so you shade in about that much of the mountain, and then you have the effect. And I like to put a little tail going off this way too, so you get kind of this effect. And then you could have like a little bit of one going like this. So you end up with sort of this total shape. And if you want that totally filled in, and that's going to give you the effect. If you're doing it with pencil, obviously you can do real shading and not just black and white. But I wanted the lithographic effect, so that's the way that I did that. For the coastlines, what you're going to do with this is, when I'm drawing a coastline, and I'm just going to draw one maybe going this way, you know, you maybe have some features here. It's just a coastline, how you imagine a coastline might look. And maybe we have it going like upside down or something, it doesn't matter. And maybe we have like the beginning of like a river inlet here, and then it goes on from there. Okay, and this could be like a river. Rivers are just going to be lines that curl around, right? The way that you would see a river on a map, kind of curl around like that. Okay, there's a river. To get this 3-line effect that's here, you have to make the actual coastline really thick. And the way that I made the coastline really, really thick, it's actually very, very simple. All I did was I went over, again, I just drew over it, being very, very careful to be slightly outside of the space where the original line was, and that just thickened it up really nicely. And you can do that like 3 or 4 times, and you can see each time I go over it, it gets thicker and more prominent. And that's the way I did it. It's really, really simple. And that creates a very, very clear delineation of where that coast actually is by just layering some more ink on it like that. And anytime there's a white space, I just kind of fill it in as best I can. So anyway, we get this nice thick line where the coast is. Then from here, you just follow that coastline around with another thin line like that. And then you can add, you know, a second or a third one to heighten the effect. So then you end up with a thick line and then a couple of thin ones, and that creates the effect of this. When you have a river inlet, you may want, like if I just thicken these lines up a little bit by drawing over them, so that we get the desired effect. And I'm doing this quickly and kind of crappily so that it doesn't take forever in a video. But when I actually did this, I was actually very slow and meticulous about it. So we can be very, very careful. We don't want the line to go all the way into that river inlet, so we can just put a little dent just like that. So we just put a little dent in where that is. Then when we go over for the next line, we just skip the dent to indicate that this is just now a big body of water. And you could put an island, like let's say we put an island here. So this island can go a couple ways. Let's thicken this line up here. Because I put it inside like a bay, we may want the first line to follow the inside coast of the bay, but we want the second line to go around the island like that, okay? And then that's kind of clear that this is like a little island right here, okay? And we make that really thick, just like that. And you end up with a nice clear view of an island. So that's how I did the coast, that's how I did the mountains. The rivers are just lines, and where I want the river to be thicker, like if I felt like the river is wider, of course it's wider as it reaches the ocean, and you could draw a delta here too if you want to draw like deltas. You could do deltas as well, okay, but I just did a big river mouth because that's the way I wanted that one to be. You just go over that line again and it gets a little thicker until you end up with something like this. The hills are just little mini mountains. They're this with a little bit of shading on one side. That's the hills. That's the hills. Pretty simple. That's all the techniques that you probably need to know to do the actual map portion. Laying it out, deciding where they're going to go, and then just drawing in the mountains, shading them in properly, drawing in the coast, and doing the extra lines for the coast. Let's talk about the text. Okay? So I'm going to switch back to my computer monitor view here, so you can see that we've added a bunch of red text. Text doesn't have to be red when you do it. It can be sort of any color you want. But this green and red text just looks like a really classic plate printing to me. That's what I wanted. There's a version of Lord of the Rings that has the red text as well. So that was definitely the aesthetic I'm going for. Here's the Inkscape file that I used to create this text. And I want to show you a couple of things that people may not know how to do in Inkscape, so that you could do this if you want to for your design projects, which is to make the words curve the way that these are curved, and to make them pop off the darker parts of the background when you need to place a word like Frostback Mountains over some actual mountains, or Ulfar Mountains over some mountains, Adalfalda over some mountains. So when you need to actually put stuff over topographical things, you can do this, and I'm going to show you both. So first thing that we're going to do here, let's talk about the curvature of the words. Inkscape has an option where you could put text on a path, and you can put it on basically any line that you want to draw. So we're going to use this Bezier curves line to draw this. I guess you could use the pencil freehand line, but that's not going to be as smooth, so we're going to use this one. And what we're going to do is we're going to click and drag, and when we click again, we're going to then create the curve that we want. And we're going to go back and edit this all later, so don't think that we're going to do this in too weird a way. And then we can create one more node up here like this, and then press return, and that creates the line. We can then edit the line with our little node tool right here. So we hit edit the path, and for each of these little nodes, we can change the curvature that's involved with it by dragging these little levers around when we click on a node. So I want this to be a little smoother and a little bit closer to the way the river is, so I'm going to do it like that. You can even add in some extra nodes. Like, let's say this isn't really sufficient. We can add in a node right here and just kind of drag that out. Drag that node maybe right here, and then you get a nice gentle curve around here. Now that we've created the path, let's create some text. I'm going to call this the winding water. So I'm just going to type here, the winding water. Okay. The font that I used for this entire project, and by the way, if you notice me sweating, it's 110 degrees in Modesto, 43 degrees Celsius for my international friends. It's hot, so I'm sweating a little bit. Please forgive me. So I'm going to call it the winding water. The font that I used for this entire map was Anaron, with the exception of North March and the Petty Kingdoms, which is Cinzel Decorative. So once I decide that, I'm going to hit Anaron in my text and font window here. And now we have the winding water. This is way too big to put on the river, huh? So let's shrink it way down to that, okay? Now we could do this red, or we could keep it black, or we could make it another color. Like we could make it blue, for instance. If we want all the water elements to be blue, we can do it blue. We're going to select the text, and then we're going to select the line we drew. We're going to go to text, put on path, and there we have it. Now, this may not take up as much space as we want. We may want winding water to be a little big. From there, we can just click the text and size it up. Oh, nope, never mind. Let's size it up here. We'll go back, we'll size it up a little bit. We'll do the same thing, text, put on path. There we go, the winding water. It's right there. We can shrink it, we can expand it, we can do lots of different things with it. Now you notice that it's kind of hard to see winding water. I'll show you how to make that text really pop off here in a second. For now, let's click the arrow tool, and we're going to just drag this off and drag the line off too. Find the text and drag the text back on. You'll notice that this document has all the lines on it, still off on the side. This is because if I want to make any little adjustments, I can. So you'll notice as I adjust this, it changes where Half Moon Hills is. So maybe I want Half Moon Hills to go up and over like this, or maybe I want it to be here, or maybe I want, you know, something else. Like I want to change the shape, I can just change the shape if I want to. From here, I can just edit the line. So here we have winding water. Let's zoom in a little bit. We can see, it's kind of hard to read because we have these mountains in the background. We're going to go to filters. We're going to go to shadows and glows. We're going to go to drop shadow, and we're going to make a white drop shadow. Okay. Sometimes this happens in Inkscape. Let me go ahead and pull this back open. Here we go. Inkscape is a free program, by the way, just so you know. We're going to go blur color. We're going to make it white, 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 white. Options, blur radius. We're going to make a pretty small blur radius of 1. We hit live preview, and all of a sudden you see there's like a little white halo around the words. I can actually make that blur radius slightly smaller if I want a more intense effect. 0.8, hit apply, and maybe that's not enough. You just do it again, and you can continue layering these white drop shadows until it's really easy and clear to see the letters. Okay, there we go. The winding water. Nice and clear and popped off, and we can do this with the same thing with mountains. I did it in a couple different places. Half Moon Hills, you can see I have a really tight, heavily layered white drop shadow to make it really stand off the background. From here, we can also see that the A and the W may be too far apart. We can change that with kerning. Even after we've put it on the path, we can change the kerning anywhere in here. If we decide the I and the G, the N and the G aren't far enough apart, once you put it on the path, we can just kind of give them both a little bit of space here. And that'll, that'll make it look even better. So that's how I got the text to sort of wander around like this. In this case, it really just kind of follows the river. And, I could do it for this river here too as well. So that's pretty much it as far as how I did all of the text effects. The font is called Anaron. It's kind of a Celtic font. Works for this. This font down here is Cinzel Decorative, which is a font I used on the cover. Now I see it, of course, after I use it, I see it everywhere. It's a really, really popular fantasy font right now, but it kind of works for all this. It's a good little serif font that also has some little doodads on it to make it look like a bit of fantasy. Hopefully this has been fun and useful for you guys. I will leave it here. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to hop on my mailing list if you want access to these files or you want to use them for your projects or whatever you want to do. I'm happy to deliver to you what you want to see, so don't hesitate to tell me. Sometimes it takes a while for me to get through the massive backlog, but I do try. And I really, really appreciate you watching, and I hope you'll have a good day. My websites are dvspress.com, davidvstewart.com. Water of Awakening, the book that this map went with, will be out on July 7th on Amazon. So check the link down below to grab it, and you guys have a great, great day.